A year ago, the conversation of race in America changed. George Floyd murdered by a Minneapolis police officer. His death sparked countless protests across the country and here in San Antonio. Demonstrators demanded a legal system that holds police to a higher standard. But with just days left in this year's session, Texas lawmakers have not approved many policy changes.
Eyewitness News reporter Matt Houston explains one measure that did pass relating to first aid and what's different 1 year later.
Lawmakers say law enforcement should have to give first aid to injured people. The legislature is poised to ban chokeholds and require police to stop their colleagues who've crossed the line. But with 6 days left in Austin, the clock is ticking.
While progress has not gone far enough, there's still a lot of work to do. We are getting there incrementally.
Ananda Thomas helped form Fix SAPD after George Floyd's death. She says she's disappointed the legislature has not banned arrests for minor traffic violations or created more uniform rules for disciplining misbehaving officers. She also wishes lawmakers would have nixed a policy called qualified immunity that protects police from lawsuits even when they've broken the law.
This pressure we've had in the past year is the only reason we've been able to get to where we're at.
She notes, though, that the San Antonio Police Union is bending a bit in its contract negotiations over officers who are disciplined. She and others contend that Floyd's death energized a movement that just needs more time.
We can't lose this fire and this spark because then nothing changes.
Matt joins us live. Matt, whatever happened to the George Floyd Act? I know it was being pushed by the Legislative Black Caucus here in Texas.
Yeah, Marvin, it did not get very far. Lawmakers essentially chopped it up into parts and took up each idea on policing changes individually. I mentioned a couple of them that are near passage, but the vast majority of that bill failed to pass and will not come up again this session. I'm Matt Houston, KENS 5 Eyewitness News.
Thank you, Matt. There is one other police-related measure heading to Governor Abbott's desk. Last night, the Senate passed the bill named in honor of Botham Jean. He was shot and killed in his own apartment by an off-duty Dallas police officer in 2018. Beaus Law would require officers to keep their body cameras turned on throughout a crime investigation. Today, Floyd's family is in Washington to echo those calls to change to President Biden and members of Congress. The family met with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and California Congresswoman Karen Bass. Both lawmakers have committed to passing strong legislation in a bipartisan way and getting it to the president's desk. The family did get to meet with President Biden privately, and they met with lead Senate negotiators on the George Floyd Justice in Policing Act.
Also today, crowds paid their respect at the Minneapolis intersection where Floyd died. In another part of the city, Floyd's sister spoke at an event billed as a celebration of life.
There's been a lot of names added to the list after my brother's death, and still nothing is being done.
In New York, a group of protesters marched from Brooklyn over the bridge into Lower Manhattan. Now, a small group there was arrested after it stopped traffic at the Holland Tunnel for 9 minutes and 29 seconds. That's the same amount of time convicted former officer Derek Chauvin knelt on Floyd's neck.